This is the beginning of an interview with Mr. Ralph Moor. Mr. Moore served in the United States Army from October 1941 to June 1946. Those were his active duty years. After active duty, he served in the reserves and the Air National Guard, retiring in 1972. This interview is being conducted at the Atlanta History Center in Atlanta, Georgia. My name is Frederick Wallace. I am the interviewer. Mr. Moore, as I explained earlier, this is your story, your opportunity to tell about your military experiences, and we want you to do so in your own words. I would like for you to begin by telling us where you were born, where you went to school, why and when you entered the United States Army, and then take us from that point on through your military career. This is your story. Will you begin, please, Mr. Moore?
Thank you, Mr. Murphy, and good morning.
The name is Wallace, sir.
My name is Ralph, initial C. Moor, M-O-O-R. I was born December 18, 1912 in Wake Forest, Georgia. I graduated from Marietta High School in 1930, graduated from the Drone School of Commerce in Atlanta in 1932. I graduated from Georgia Tech in the fall of 1932. I graduated from Watertown, Georgia State University with a bachelor's degree in 1937. I followed that with a Master of Arts degree from the Georgia Western University in 1947. In the summer of 1939, I was on a trip that took me to New York to the 1939 World's Fair, and then northward into Canada, as far north as Quebec City. Between Quebec City and Montreal, on a Sunday afternoon, it was announced on the radio that Hitler and Stalin had signed a mutual non-aggression pact. And I observed with the people I was with that he was locking the back door so he could go out the front. And I thought he'd invade Belgium and France, but he went to Poland instead. But I decided at that time to, when I returned to Atlanta, to find a way that I could use my talents in service. And so I pursued that course of action and was commissioned a second lieutenant in the Adjutant General's Department in June 1940. That's
how old were you at the time, Mr. Moore?
27 years old.
27?
Okay. And so I knew I was adaptable age. I was married, had one child and on the way, and knew that I wanted to serve if our country needed my services. So since the Adjutant General's Department was in personnel management and I was in that field, I took my commission in that field. I had to be a college graduate, which I was, and have certain recommendations which I received very gracefully and gratefully. And
could you explain the recommendations that you were speaking of?
Well, Dr. George M. Sparks, who was head of the Georgia University at that time in Atlanta, was one recommendation. A former employer, Mr. R.K. Thrower, a former employer, was a recommender, and the most finest recommendation from Chancellor S.B. Sanford, Chancellor of the University System of Georgia. With those three letters of recommendation in my diploma, I went over to the 4th Corps Area Headquarters with my college diploma and entered my application for study for commission. In October of 1940, I received my first sub-course, and in April of 1941, let's go back on those dates. In October 1939, I received my first sub-course, and in April of 1940, I submitted my last one. Was commissioned June the 1st, 1940. Was ordered active duty in the Adjutant General's office in July of 1940, where I made a survey of the reproduction section, the mimeographing and things of that kind, and office procedures. And at that time, the Army was changing over from manual records keeping to machine records.
What was your first duty station?
Sir?
What was your first duty station?
The
You said you were ordered to active duty at what station?
The Adjutant General's office in Washington, in the War Department in Washington.
Oh, in Washington, D.C.
In the munitions building on
Okay.
Constitution Avenue.
Good.
I was ordered there for 2 weeks active duty. And the same order that ordered me to active duty promoted my supervisor there to lieutenant colonel. And well, I'm getting ahead of my story, so cut that off for just a minute, will you? Was my immediate boss, and he was lieutenant colonel at that time, and I did whatever he wanted me to do in the War Department for those 2 weeks. And he was later to become the commandant of the Adjutant General School, which was at the south post of Fort Mower, Arlington Cantonment. He contacted me to come on board as a faculty member because I was teaching at what is now Georgia State University at that time. I was teaching shorthand and typing and business procedures, and he wanted me to be an instructor at the Adjutant General School that he was forming. But I requested that I go through the course before I became an instructor, and so he reluctantly agreed for me to do that. So on October the 29th, 1941, I was ordered to active duty as a student at the Adjutant General School. Colonel Holdridge at that time, later General Holdridge, said he was mighty glad to see me and would want me to stay on the faculty after I finished the course. The course was to end on December the 17th, 1941. Pearl Harbor came on December 7, 1941, and all orders were canceled at that time, and a number of us who were second lieutenants at the time were ordered to active duty in the War Department itself. I was assigned to what was the death section of the enlisted branch of the Adjutant General's Department. The death section had visited upon it on December the 7th. The casualties from Guam, the Philippines, from Hawaii particularly, and were just overwhelmed with notifying survivors of casualties. And so we...
Could I ask you for clarification?
Yes.
When you say the death section, what does that refer to? What does that mean?
That's the death section of the enlisted branch of the Adjutant General's Department.
Okay, I don't understand the term death section.
Well, it was the death section that handled all the death notifications.
Oh, the death section. Okay, very good.
Death, D-E-A-T-H,
Good.
death
Sorry, I
section
misunderstood. Yeah.
of the Adjutant General's Department.
Mhm.
And so the death section, which was a small section because it handled the casualties, the deaths by accident or by natural sources or otherwise, to notify the next of kin and then handle the record keeping for that occasion. So it was overwhelmed, and so 3 of us who were second lieutenants were assigned to that operation. And I returned to Atlanta for a 10-day leave to get my family, my wife and baby, and bring them back to Washington and find a place to live and pursue the duty. The casualty became a casualty branch, a full-service branch headed by a colonel before long, and to handle all of the notifications and all the family relations of casualties. I was one of the officers in charge of family relations of casualties in the War Department during World War II until June of 1945. June 1945, I went to the Philippine Islands to be second in command of the casualty notification of General MacArthur's army. And there was quite a story too. On December 7, 1941, when Pearl Harbor was stricken, pandemonium broke out all over the United States. I could observe the pandemonium that hit Washington, D.C. because I was there at the time. And when I reported back to the Adjutant General School, which was at the Arlington Cantonment, part of Fort Myer, Virginia, actually it's adjacent to where the Pentagon was being built at that time and where the Pentagon is now. And we started from there into the War Department. I reported there on December 27, 1941, and stayed there until June 1945. At that time, we were notifying the next of kin of casualties in the best way we could, and by telegraph, and then by letter, and I was in charge of the correspondence section. I helped draft the wording of the telegrams. We received casualty reports as it developed by code. We would not receive a killed in action report. We would have an ether report. We wouldn't have seriously wounded in the report. We would have ingot as a code word. And we had code words for each part of it, each degree of casualty. Now, I refer to casualty not only as death casualty, but also as wounded casualty, and also death by other means, such as an accident or in a bar fight or something of that kind. We always had to have a line of duty board, and it was a standard operating procedure in the War Department that I, as an Adjutant General, could approve or disapprove the recommendations of the commanding officer, the commanding general, who handled the line of duty board for non-battle casualties and non-hospitalization casualties. One thing I found to be of interesting, and parenthetically, there was a Judge Hasty, who was a colored man, had to review every finding that we've made that the death was not in line of duty and was due to his own misconduct. If it were a colored soldier, it had to go to him for review. If it were a white soldier, my word was the last word on it. But I certainly appreciated the further protection we had, because I was as totally non-discriminatory as a human person could be, I felt. And I will say this for Judge Hasty. Every decision that I made not in line of duty, duties on misconduct, that went to him, I was never reversed one single solitary time, not once. And so my findings, I'm sure, were as objective as I could be. I was appointed in charge of correspondence. When we got correspondence, when we addressed the survival of a Negro soldier, always addressed by the first name. I changed that immediately. No soldier that spilled his blood for me and my country was different from another. And I changed that immediately. She was Mrs. Jones or Mrs. Smith or whatever, the same as anybody else was. And that change in policy lasted. There was one particular grammatical expression that was used that I changed to be grammatically correct, and Those old meters in the War Department showed me precedents back to 1903. That expression had been used, and it went to Colonel Pulsford, later General Pulsford at that time, and he said, well, they wanted to overrule me, and they said, well, which is correct? I said, well, Lieutenant Moore is correct. I said, didn't change it. So we tried to modernize those things in the War Department because much tradition was in vogue at that time. The casualty branch.
Is this terminology you're speaking of was in correspondence?
Yes.
Okay.
In
So
correspondence.
it's terminology that you would use in correspondence?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. And the casualty branch operation eventually became so large that we were on 24 hours, 7 days a week. And I, as an officer, would report for the office before the graveyard shift went off. I'd stay through the whole day shift and wait for the swing shift came on so I could supervise the operation of all three. Many times I would take the midnight, the graveyard shift, many times the swing shift, and many times the day shift. And we tried to be as humane as possible in our notifications and certainly as grateful as possible. And it was terribly laborious. We had gasoline rationing. I had an A card that entitled me to 3 gallons a week. So I rode the streetcars and buses of Washington. And many times, going home at night at midnight, I'd be on the streetcar, be worn out, and young soldiers would say, look at that officer over there. Been out partying all night, and I've been working all 24 hours a day. So that pretty well covered my Washington experience. It was a large operation. We had
What stands out in your mind about the Washington experience? When you think back on it, what is the thing that comes to mind immediately?
that Washington is isolated from the world. Washington is a marvelous place to be for a couple of years, but you lose contact with the rest of the world. And it's for some reason or other. Now, I will digress for a moment and say this, that I was on Capitol Hill for 2 tours. I was Executive Secretary to Senator Richard B. Russell, and later was Executive Secretary to Senator Walter F. George, both United States Senators from Georgia. So I know that side. I was in the Office of Education as Assistant Chief of the Housing and Loan Program, so I know the executive branch side in addition to the wartime side. So Washington itself is a marvelous place to be. It's so imbued in so much history and so much tradition that it's a great place to be, and everybody should spend some time there. But you need to really get away from that to learn how the whole country works. I'd like to explain for the record the emotions and the attitudes I had on first being assigned to the casualty operation of the War Department. The numbers were overwhelming. The task was overwhelming. And the grief was overwhelming. I felt the sympathy for every casualty. And for the first 2 weeks I could hardly sleep, could hardly eat, could hardly do anything because of the emotion involved in the overwhelming numbers and the overwhelming sacrifices that people were making on my behalf as a free citizen. But the more I got into it, the more I realized that it was a job of management, of administration, and a technicality that had to be done as humanely, as sympathetically, as effectively, and as efficiently as was humanly possible. And so when I could convert my sense of grief to the attitude that it was something I knew how to do and could do. I set about to do it. As a matter of fact, I was never in a table of organization position that called for less than a lieutenant colonel. And so I was very fortunate to go from second lieutenant to major in 18 months. And I served as a second lieutenant for 3 months until February the 1st, 1942. Served as first lieutenant for 6 months until August 26, 1942, when I was promoted to captain. And then on June the 9th, 1943, I was promoted to major. Now, I was 9 months as a major and as a captain rather than 6 months. My recommendation was in for promotion to major, but we received a new commanding officer named Charles Easterbrook. He was a colonel. He had one eye that had a friendly glint in it, had one eye that was very stern. The one with the friendly glint was a glass eye. And he was a stemwinder of a colonel. And I remember so well the day that Captain Moore, this is Miss Hospital, Colonel Easterbrook would like to see you. So I reported to Colonel Easterbrook, said, yes, sir. He said, Moore, did you see this note in here from General Ulio? I said, yes, sir, I saw it. He said, why didn't you do what it said do? I said, well, sir, the colonel told me, and this is a direct quote, sir, he said, Moore, if I tell you to do something a certain way, you'll do it that way, even if Jesus Christ himself says do it another way, sir. When I saw the general's note in there, I did it the way the colonel said do it, sir, because to me, General Ulio does not overrank Jesus Christ. He said, well now. And so then my recommendation apparently went in for major, and he took the brakes off of it. But he was a very efficient, very able man, a very fine colonel, very fine commander, and a very good leader. But he expected things to be done his way, and I was doing my best to do it his way. But many times we had communications from higher up that said, prepare information for my letter, or prepare a letter for my signature. And this was one of those cases where we would prepare information upon which to base a reply, and I had prepared it for signature because the colonel had told me to. So that shows a little bit about how we operated there. And we had a series of commanding officers, and some were very good, well, all of them were very good, very compassionate, and they stayed out of our way most of the time. My biggest trouble came from a lieutenant colonel who had been a career enlisted man, and he had a suspicion of any young fellow who had a college degree, and he was hard to get along with, but nevertheless, when he was stricken, was in Walter Reed Hospital, and after the war was over, I went by to see him, and we reconciled and made up all my differences, and he died, was a friend of mine. But Stanley Walker, I can tell you some stories how he delayed our operations and got in our way simply because he wanted to exert his authority. But he was a good man, as shrewd as could be, and had been a sergeant for a lot of the officers, general officers, when they were captains. And so he had no trouble being commissioned. And he was a good man in many ways, but he was suspicious of anyone who had a college degree.
You were talking about, you were beginning to speak of your reassignment to the Philippines overseas. At what point did this come?
Yes. Well, one of the, we were so beleaguered in the War Department that we felt that we should have some overseas experience during the war. And so I was requested by General Eisenhower's headquarters in Europe to be a part of that team, but the powers that be in Washington turned it down. And I let the word be known if I were requested again by any headquarters to honor it and let me go. And so General MacArthur's headquarters did request me by name, and so I asked to be assigned to that. So I was sent over there by plane, by first priority, to get there as soon as possible. So I went over there in June of 1945, and the minute I went to the casualty reporting section at that time, and I found that it was morale was very low, because although many of the enlisted men and officers who were assigned there had enough points to come home, they were denied the privilege of coming home simply because they were said to be essential to stay there. I found the morale very low. They were ostensibly working late at night and things of that kind, and I sat in on those sessions and found out that they were goofing off during the daytime and working at night to make it look like they were important. And so I told them, I called my staff together, I had 4 sections under me, and I told each section head that if a person in his outfit had enough points to go home, I wanted them to go home on schedule, that we would handle the work and we'd get it done, that they were not efficient. I demanded efficiency, and they would show up not in proper uniform, wouldn't wear the insignia. I required that be done. We had whacks in our department who liked to, who had the rank of corporal or sergeant or something of that kind, enlisted of that kind. They preferred to have no insignia at all, so to be taken as Red Cross girls and cadet officers. If they showed their rank as enlisted, they could, protocol would not permit them cadet officers at that time. So I required that they wear their stripes during the daytime, and I had no supervision over them at night. They were in a separate place for nighttime supervision. So what you wear there is none of my business. What you wear on duty, if you're a sergeant, I want you to act like a sergeant and be a sergeant. So that improved morale considerably when I insisted that everybody dressed appropriately for the daytime experience. And after about a month, I called my 4 supervisors together and I said, look, I said, you know what you're doing. I prove that you know what you're doing because you're doing it right. And so I'm going to be here, and if you have anything that requires you to stick your neck out, don't you stick your neck out. You bring it to me, if the neck is to be stuck out, it's going to be mine. But otherwise, you go ahead with your work, and don't bother me with trivialities that you know how to handle, and I'll be here for whatever help you need. And so I was able to do more reading and have more leisurely time than I ever had in Washington. It was just a real snap because I had such able people working for me.
And you are located in the city of Manila? In
the city of Manila, not in, now General MacArthur's headquarters were in City Hall, but my headquarters were in a temporary building out by Rizal Stadium, where the 1932 Olympics had been held. It was a lovely facility, but we were adjacent to the Rizal Stadium, and we were adequately provided for. I had a Jeep that I used for transportation after a while. First, we had a 6x6 truck that would come for us and take us back to where we lived. We took our meals over at the Manila Hotel, though our billet was in the Peralta Apartments. And we had a small officers club on the top floor of the Peralta Apartments. And when VJ Day came on September 2nd, 1945, we could see the flares and all the fireworks over Manila Bay from the top floor of the Peralta Apartments.
How did your experience differ in Manila as compared to Washington, D.C.?
In Washington, D.C., it was a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operation. In Manila, it was a 8 to 5 operation, 7 days a week, with 1 day off during the week. And we had time to go to chapel on Sunday and have worship services. In Washington, it was a 24-hour, 7-day operation, hectic as could be. I felt many times if I could select the most efficient 25 out of the 100 employees in Washington that I had under my supervision, I could have handled the job a whole lot more efficiently than I was, because I spent so much time straightening out errors, straightening out grammar, straightening out operations that I didn't have to do in the Philippines. Those people were well qualified. We were in the staging area. We were going to be in the invasion of Japan. That was part of our operation. And we were slated to go into the southernmost of the 3 main islands of Japan on D+4 for the casualty operating system. Before that time, we would be on board ship out on the beaches. But we were saved the invasion, as you know, by the dropping of the atomic bomb. But the operation in the Philippines was a very pleasant operation. We had time to sightsee some and to view the hinterland. And in Washington, you could see a girl look good in a sweater. We were so far back in the boondocks in the Philippines from time to time, we'd say, boy, wouldn't she look good in a sweater? So.
Please explain that. You said that you were located in the city of Manila, but you say you were in the boondocks in the Philippines.
We had time for sightseeing, as I mentioned.
Oh, okay.
And so we would take trips, 4 of us would get in a Jeep and take a trip on our day off. We were off 1 day a week out of the 7. We had a 7-day-a-week operation where we were off rotated on 1 day a week. And so that 1 day a week we went, this is after VJ Day, after September 2nd. We had time then to do it because we weren't having battle casualties reported every day.
Okay.
So we were winding down our operation. And we had time to do some sightseeing and learn a little history, and try to learn Tagalog, which was the native language over there, and be a part of the community, really.
Were you at any time exposed to any type of hostile fire?
Not directly. We were very cautious of landmines and would not go across unattended fields that we didn't know had been cleared of landmines. We didn't want to step on a landmine. But I was not under hostile fire at any time. I was where I could have been from time to time, but I wasn't. No, I was never under hostile fire.
Okay. And what was your grade while you were in the Philippines?
Sir?
What was your rank?
A major.
You were a major?
A major.
Okay.
Then I was promoted to lieutenant colonel when I came home.
After you came home?
Yeah.
Yeah, continue please.
Then I stayed a lieutenant colonel until May of 1953. I became a colonel. I was 40 years old at the time, and was commanding officer's selective service section of the Georgia Army National Guard.
Let's go back to the Philippines. When you were ready to rotate back to the States, when did that occur?
That came in March, latter part of February, early March of 1946.
1946.
And I came home to be separated, and came home by ship, troop ship. It was a hospital ship converted to be a troop ship to come home, and the majors were the lowest rank entitled to cabins. All below that were assigned to different quarters down below where you had 7 bunks in a row to get up there. And I was in a cabin with 3 other majors coming back. So we had our own private bathroom. And we ate in the officer's mess instead of in the other mess on the board ship. In the officer's mess, the officers of the ship really had it well. We had capon, and we had steaks, and we had high-class food of that kind, whereas the others had pork and beans. Because I was so seasick coming back that, well, as we left Manila, we ran into a 75-mile-an-hour gale. And the ship was so small, it was just about 4,000 tons. The ship was so small that the nose would go under the water and it would trend screw, and both propellers were spinning uncontrollably out of the water. Then it would climb up the next wave and fall over the next trough. And I became seasick. I was in the sick bay for 3 days on the hot dogs and fare of that kind that I knew was served in other parts of the ship. So when I came back to my quarters, I was determined I was not going to be seasick anymore. And I counted the number of times I re-swallowed my breakfast that morning, 12 times. And wasn't seasick after that. I got my sea legs, and I really enjoyed the voyage from there on. Didn't care how rough it got, but to have come out of a placid sea into the gale of 75-mile-an-hour winds, those were tremendous seas. It was a small ship, about 5,000 tons, which is very small, but it was a hospital ship. And we landed in San Francisco and took a troop train from there to Fort McPherson. We went up the river from San Francisco and boarded the train there. Along the way, I was commander of a car, and the train was split off from various parts of the country as we crossed the country. And we split off, I think, in Memphis to go to Atlanta. And separated there, and then was discharged and put on terminal leave until June 11th, 1946.
And was your family here in Atlanta?
They were in Atlanta at that time. Yes.
So when you went overseas, they
came
left
back to
Washington and came back to Atlanta?
They came back to Atlanta. I moved them back here before all that. So, if any other details that you'd like to know, I'd be glad to fill them in.
Well, looking back on your active duty, what stands out in your mind as the most important achievement that you had, or your most important contribution to the war effort?
I feel my most important contribution was working out the system, working out the wording for notifications of letters and things of that kind. I tried to make them as modern as I could, and learning the style manual of the War Department at that time. I, of course, conformed to that, but I did my best to be completely nonpartisan in all of my operations and that kind of thing, and the way it went. Now, after World War II, I'll cover that rather briefly. I stayed in the reserves until 1950, I entered the National Guard, and into the selective service section of the Georgia National Guard, and so we studied selective service altogether on that, and we trained on that and studied the history of it, and later on, because of my qualifications from that time when Ernest Vanderbilt, who was the Adjutant General of Georgia and State Director of Selective Service, when he resigned both positions in 1954 to run for governor, Governor Talmadge appointed me to succeed him as State Director of Selective Service. And I did that. And let me tell one experience I had in that. While I was State Director of Selective Service, I had an experienced staff. Colonel Shelton had been there from the word go, but he, for some reason, turned down the appointment of State Director of Selective Service, and I was appointed in his stead. But he was my deputy, and he had been there all the time through. I had been with Senator Russell in Winder. I knew the people over there pretty well, and this doctor in Winder was requesting that he not fulfill his obligated service, which was part of the selective service operation. He had been educated as a doctor with obligated service and was obligated to serve for 2 years on active duty to compensate for his training as a doctor. And he was petitioning that he be further deferred because of so many pregnant women he was attending. Well, against the advice of my staff, I agreed to meet with the Selective Service Board, the county board in Barry County in Winder, and with the supporters of the doctor to hear his appeal for further deferment. So we were going to meet where the local board met over there in Winder, but we got there and there were so many people we couldn't accommodate them in the office, so we went to the Superior Court chambers in the courthouse, and we had standing room only there. So I was there, had some people with me, and the people who wanted further deferment for the doctor presented their case because he was obligated to care for prenatal care to these pregnant women. And he just could not turn loose his practice and go to service. So when all the arguments were done on both sides, I had opposed and proposed that as state director, I could not direct the local board to do anything. It had complete jurisdiction. I could appeal its decision to an appeal board, but I, as state director, could not overrule a local board. And that's the way it should be. I'm very much in favor of that. But I recommended to the local board that the doctor be deferred for 9 months from this day. And at 9 months from today, he would be ordered active duty. And any pregnant woman he took on for their care would know that 9 months from the day he was going to service, whether she was at term or not. And for 9 months from then, he went to service. And so that was one of the pleasures I had as a state director. And my adversary and I then went to lunch together. I had known him in Winder when I was with Senator Russell, and I knew him to be a fair-minded man. So then we went to lunch together, shook hands, and parted, and I never saw him again. He never saw me again. But I enjoyed very much the operation under General Hershey. He was one of the most patriotic men I've ever known. I got to know him very closely during my service as State Director of Selective Service and later. And whenever I was in Washington, I'd call on him, and he was finally a 4-star general assistant to the president. And I called on him in his office, and he was going to take me back to Selective Service headquarters where I was on active duty. And he took me in his car, but he had a dizziness that made him unsteady walking. He served on active duty till the day of his death. He never retired, but he was a 4-star general. He's one of the unsung heroes of World War II. He had to see to it that we had ships built, munitions built, airplanes built, that food and fiber was provided for the population of the United States at the same time. And he did that through a series of deferments. The only exemptions were those who was exempted by law, but there were no exemptions under the Selective Service system as such. There were deferments, and you could be deferred for this purpose or that purpose, agricultural purpose or industrial purpose or necessary purposes, but you could not be exempt. And so a deferment had a date time on it, and if you weren't producing enough food and fiber on your farm to have an agricultural deferment, you went to service. And same way, if you were manufacturing airplanes, manufacturing tanks and ships, or doing necessary work in transportation or otherwise, it was a deferment. General Hershey had the wisdom to develop the whole Selective Service system where the local board was the power. The local board had the power to do, the power not to do. And General Hershey himself could not overrule anybody, except where it was classified, like the Manhattan Project that was developing the atomic bombs in such secrecy. He had the power to defer under those circumstances. But under ordinary circumstances, he did not have that power, nor would he exercise that power, because he's such a judicious man. But he developed a system whereby the local board had the power. As state director, I couldn't override a local board. I could appeal it to an appeal board. And I might not win, might win, might not win. But General Hershey had the power to intercede where secrecy was concerned.
And how long did you work for General Hershey?
I was a state director for about a year, from 1954 to 1955.
Mm-hmm. And what happened after that period?
Well, I was later Commissioner of Personnel for the state of Georgia, state directors, merit system director for the state of Georgia, which was the civil service section of the state of Georgia, operated that operation until I retired in 1972. But I stayed in the Selective Service National Guard section until I retired with the rank of Brigadier General at that time. That's where that came in.
And how many children do you have, Mr. Moore?
I have 2 children. My oldest son was born January the 2nd, 1941, and he went on to take his ROTC commission in Georgia Tech, and he eventually retired as a colonel, and a retired colonel for this day. He had many interesting commands, very interesting, and he went on to have his PhD degree in international economics and retired as a professor of economics at Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton. My youngest son took ROTC at the University of Georgia and was commissioned a second lieutenant, but it did not fit his lifestyle, so he did not seek a career in the military. But my oldest son had very interesting assignments.
Is your wife still with you?
My wife is not the mother. My wife is not the mother of my children.
Mm-hmm.
But my wife is an invalid now, so she couldn't come with me this morning. But
So is there anything else you would like to add to this, Mr. Moore?
cut this off for a moment. I'll see if, in closing this interview, I want to thank very much the recommendation of Mr. Hamler that I have this interview. And I agreed to the interview simply because I felt that the grunt work, the pick and shovel work that was done during World War II is hardly emphasized at all. The hitting of the beaches and the heroics of World War II have taken over, and well, they should. But there had to be a lot of administrative work done behind the scenes. And I am glad that I had the privilege of being in that capacity during World War II. As someone said, you can learn to run a you can learn to shoot a rifle a whole lot quicker than you learn to run a typewriter. And I had the privilege of being able to run a typewriter, and that stood me in very, very good stead in the War Department, in that I could draft letters and write letters and have fought to be followed by the staff. And I appreciate the fact that I had the opportunity to serve in the ranks from second lieutenant in 1940 to the age of promotion to brigadier general in 1972. And as I sit here today, I had 32 years of active reserve National Guard service, and it's been 32 years since I received my separation papers. So with that, I appreciate very much my gracious interviewer of today, and I wish him well, and I wish everyone a very Merry Christmas.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Moore. We certainly appreciate this interview. And at some point, I'm sure that you will be able to get a copy of this for your own use and for the use of your children, your grandchildren in later years.
Well, I'd certainly like to have it because it was totally unrehearsed, as you know, and totally unanticipated. Really, I didn't know what to anticipate. And so as I sit here today, I'll be 92 years old day after tomorrow. I feel that I have acquitted myself adequately, shall we say.
I think we will all agree to that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.